You. Yes. The one who chose stillness over storms, who wrapped your truth in layers of quiet because you believed that love was too fragile to survive honesty. I see you. I've watched civilizations build walls around their hearts, thinking distance equals protection, thinking silence equals safety. But here's what I know after years of building rockets that defy gravity and systems that rewrite reality. The most dangerous lie we tell ourselves is that hiding preserves what we treasure most. Silence doesn't protect love, it suffocates it. You learned early that good women don't make noise. They don't disrupt. They carry their love like a secret treasure, buried so deep that even they forget where they placed it. Someone told you, maybe it was your mother, maybe it was the world, that if you loved too loudly, you would drive people away. That vulnerability was weakness, that expressing your needs made you needy, that the safest place for your heart was locked behind your ribs, guarded by silence, protected by distance. So you practiced. You became an architect of emotional fortresses. When he asked if you were okay, you smiled and said fine. When your heart screamed for connection, you offered pleasantries. When you wanted to say, I need you, I'm afraid, I love you so much it terrifies me, you said nothing at all. You convinced yourself this was wisdom, this was maturity, this was love. But late at night, when the world went quiet and you were alone with your thoughts, you felt it. That hollow ache, that growing distance between who you were and who you pretended to be. You watched him across rooms, across conversations, across the space you'd carefully constructed, and you wondered if he could see you anymore. If anyone could. You'd become so skilled at hiding that you disappeared even from yourself. The paradox consumed you. You stayed silent to keep him close, but the silence pushed him further away. You withheld your truth to avoid conflict, but the withholding created a different kind of war. One fought in glances that said too little, in touches that felt like habit rather than hunger, in conversations that skimmed surfaces like stones across water, never diving deep enough to disturb what lived beneath. You told yourself stories to justify the silence. He's too busy. He wouldn't understand. If I tell him what I really feel, it will be too much. He'll think I'm dramatic, emotional, complicated. Better to be easy, better to be low maintenance. Better to require nothing so he never has to choose between giving or leaving. You made yourself small enough to fit into spaces that weren't built for you, and you called it compromise. Society taught you well. It showed you 1,000 examples of women who loved too openly and paid the price. Women called desperate, clingy, too much. You saw them mocked, dismissed, abandoned, and you swore you would never be them. You would be different, controlled, contained, safe. You would protect your love by never fully revealing it. You would keep your heart safe by never fully offering it. But protection became prison. Safety became suffocation. The walls you built to keep pain out also kept connection from getting in. You stood behind your fortress of silence and wondered why love felt so lonely, why intimacy felt so distant, why the very thing you were trying to preserve was slowly dying in your hands. You watched other relationships and envied their ease, not understanding that ease comes from honesty, not hiding. That closeness grows in the fertile soil of vulnerability, not in the sterile environment of emotional control. You saw couples laugh together, fight together, grow together, and you couldn't understand why your own connection felt so static, so stuck, so strangely silent. The fear became a companion. It whispered constantly, if you speak, you'll lose everything. If you ask for what you need, he'll realize you're not who he thought you were. If you show him the raw, unfiltered truth of your heart, he'll run. So you stayed quiet. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You nodded when you wanted to object. You agreed when every cell in your body rebelled. And you called this love. But deep down, in that place where truth lives regardless of whether we acknowledge it, you knew. You knew that what you were building wasn't sustainable. That a relationship built on selective honesty is a relationship built on sand. That love cannot thrive in the absence of truth, no matter how noble your intentions for hiding it. You wanted to believe that if you just loved hard enough, silently enough, patiently enough, it would be enough. That he would somehow see through the silence to the devotion beneath. that your unexpressed feelings would transmit themselves telepathically, that love could survive without words, without vulnerability, without the messy, terrifying, beautiful act of being fully known. But relationships don't work that way. Connection doesn't work that way. Love doesn't work that way. And somewhere in your silent suffering, you began to realize that the very strategy you'd adopted to protect your relationship was the thing slowly destroying it. Let me tell you something I learned building SpaceX. Every rocket that successfully reaches orbit does so because of precise communication between thousands of systems. Sensors constantly relay data. Computers adjust trajectories in real time. Engineers speak truth to power about risks, problems, and corrections needed. When we launched Falcon 1 and failed 3 times, it wasn't because we lacked passion or commitment. It failed because somewhere in the system, information wasn't flowing correctly. Critical truths weren't being communicated. Silence, even well-intentioned silence, was the enemy. The same principle applies to love. A relationship is a complex system requiring constant, honest communication to maintain trajectory. When you withhold information about your emotional state, your needs, your fears, your desires, you're essentially flying blind. You're asking your partner to navigate toward a destination you've never revealed, using maps you've never shared, following stars you refuse to point out. He cannot love the version of you he doesn't know exists. He cannot meet needs you never express. He cannot bridge distances you never acknowledge. And he cannot build a future with someone who won't show him her present reality. This is the core fallacy of protective silence. It assumes that hiding your complexity makes you more lovable. But the opposite is true. Complexity is what makes you human. Depth is what makes you interesting. Vulnerability is what makes connection possible. When you flatten yourself into something simple and easy, you don't become more attractive. You become less real. And people don't fall in love with simplified versions. They fall in love with whole people, complete with contradictions, needs, fears, and desires. You thought silence was a gift you were giving him. Freedom from your emotional demands, space from your needs, relief from your truth. But what you were actually giving him was confusion. He felt the distance but didn't understand its source. He sensed something missing but couldn't name what. He reached for you and found performance instead of presence. And slowly, imperceptibly, he began to retreat. Not because you were too much, but because you weren't giving him enough of who you actually were. Here's what I've learned about systems. Whether they're rockets or relationships, they fail from the inside out, not the outside in. External pressures, work stress, financial concerns, life changes, these things test relationships, yes, but they don't destroy healthy ones. What destroys relationships is internal misalignment. It's when two people are nominally together but fundamentally disconnected, when they're physically close but emotionally strangers, when they're having conversations but not communicating truth. Your silence created the very thing you feared most: distance. The gap between your inner world and your expressed world became a chasm. And he, not understanding that chasm existed, simply lived on the other side of it, wondering why you felt so far away even when you were right beside him. Think about it logically. How can someone love you fully if they only know you partially? How can they choose you completely if you're only showing them fragments? How can they commit to forever with someone who won't reveal today? The math doesn't work. The logic falls apart. You cannot build lasting intimacy on temporary truths. And here's the painful irony. In trying to make yourself easy to love, you made yourself impossible to truly know. In trying to avoid being too much, you ended up being not enough. Not enough honesty, not enough vulnerability, not enough of the messy, magnificent reality of who you actually are. The protective silence you wrapped around your love had the opposite effect of protection. It was like putting a plant in a sealed container to keep it safe from storms. Yes, the storms won't touch it, but it also won't get the rain, the wind, the sunlight it needs to grow. Eventually, safety becomes stagnation. Protection becomes suffocation. And the very thing you were trying to preserve withers in the controlled environment you created. I think about this when I think about Mars. The dream of making life multiplanetary isn't about running away from Earth's problems. It's about ensuring humanity's survival through expansion, through growth, through taking necessary risks. If we only play it safe, if we only protect what we have, we guarantee eventual extinction. Progress requires vulnerability. It requires stepping into the unknown. It requires saying, this is what I need, this is what I dream, this is who I am, even when the outcome is uncertain. Your relationship is the same. If you only protect it, never stretching it, never being honest about what you need it to become, you guarantee its stagnation. Love doesn't survive in stasis. It survives in the dynamic tension between two people who are brave enough to keep revealing themselves, keep asking for what they need, keep being honest even when honesty is uncomfortable. You ask yourself why he seems distant, why the spark faded, why conversations feel hollow. But you're asking the wrong question. The right question is, how can intimacy survive when one person has chosen to be invisible? How can passion thrive when authenticity has been sacrificed for approval? How can he fall deeper in love with someone who won't let him see her depths? The tragedy isn't that you're too much. The tragedy is that you've convinced yourself to be too little. You've compressed your complexity into something digestible, your needs into something manageable, your truth into something acceptable. And in doing so, you've robbed both of you of the full experience of loving and being loved by a real, whole, complicated human being. Silence doesn't protect love, because love isn't a fragile thing requiring protection from truth. Real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that transforms, the kind that makes life worth living, is built on truth. It's forged in the fire of honest conversations. It's strengthened by the weight of shared reality. It grows in the space between two people who trust each other enough to be fully, messily, imperfectly themselves. So here's what happens now. Here's where the story shifts. Here's where you stop being a passenger in your own relationship and start being a participant. Here's where silence ends and truth begins. Here's where you realize that the risk of speaking is far less than the certainty of staying silent. You start small, not with grand declarations or dramatic revelations, but with simple, honest moments. The next time he asks how you are, you tell him. Actually tell him. Not the curated version, not the socially acceptable response, but the truth. I'm overwhelmed. I'm lonely. I'm happy. I'm afraid. I need help. I need space. I need connection. Whatever the truth is, you give it to him. Watch what happens. Watch how he responds to your humanity instead of your performance. Watch how relief washes over his face when you finally let him see you. Watch how, instead of running away from your truth, he moves toward it. Because here's what you didn't understand. He's been waiting for this. He's been longing for the real you, not the edited version. He's been feeling the same distance and not understanding why. You practice vulnerability like a skill, because that's what it is. You've spent years training yourself to hide now. You train yourself to reveal. You say I'm scared instead of I'm fine. You say I need you instead of I'm independent. You say this hurt me instead of it's okay. Each time you speak truth, you're rewiring years of conditioning that taught you silence was safety. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, your heart races. Yes, every instinct screams to retreat back into the familiar fortress of control. But you do it anyway, because you finally realized that the only thing more terrifying than being fully known is living your entire life as a stranger to the person you love. You learn to distinguish between different types of silence. There's the silence of peace, the comfortable quiet that comes from two people who understand each other so deeply that words become optional. That's beautiful. That's connection. But then there's the silence of withholding, the tense quiet that comes from unexpressed truth sitting heavy in the room. That's what you're learning to break. That's what you're learning to transform into words. You become a translator of your own heart. When anxiety whispers don't tell him that, he'll think you're crazy. You translate it. I need to tell him this because hiding my reality is what's actually crazy. When fear says you're being too needy, you translate, having needs isn't being needy, it's being human. When shame says no one wants to hear about your struggles, you translate the right person wants to know all of me, including the struggling parts. Think about it like this. When I'm designing a new technology, I don't hide the problems from my team. I don't pretend the prototype is perfect when it's flawed. I don't stay silent about challenges we're facing. That would be absurd. That would guarantee failure. Instead, we illuminate problems. We discuss them. We solve them together. Your relationship deserves the same approach. Illuminate the problems. Discuss them. Solve them together. You start making requests instead of harboring resentments. Instead of stewing in silence about what you wish would change, you ask, can we spend more time together? Can we talk about this thing that's bothering me? Can we try something different? And here's what's revolutionary. You do it without apologizing for having needs, without minimizing what matters to you, without preemptively dismissing your own requests before he has a chance to respond. The transformation isn't instant. Years of protective silence don't dissolve in a single conversation. But every time you choose honesty over hiding, you're building new neural pathways. You're creating new habits. You're establishing a new normal where truth is the foundation, not the exception. You notice things changing. Conversations go deeper. Laughter comes easier. Touch becomes more meaningful. The space between you shrinks because you're finally allowing real connection instead of just maintaining comfortable distance. He starts opening up too, because vulnerability is contagious. When you show him it's safe to be real, he brings his reality too. And suddenly you're not two people performing for each other, you're two people actually knowing each other. This is where the magic happens. This is where love transforms from something you're protecting into something you're building. You realize that all this time, you weren't preserving love through silence, you were preventing it from becoming what it could be. You were keeping it small and safe when it wanted to be expansive and transformative. You start seeing your relationship as a shared creation, like building a spacecraft together. Both people need to communicate clearly about what's working and what isn't. Both need to voice concerns before they become crises. Both need to celebrate victories and acknowledge failures. The spacecraft doesn't fly itself. The relationship doesn't sustain itself on assumptions and silence. It thrives on the constant, honest exchange of information between two committed partners. And you discover something unexpected. Being fully known is terrifying, yes, but it's also liberating. There's a lightness that comes from dropping the performance. There's an ease that comes from not constantly monitoring and controlling your expression. There's a joy that comes from being loved not despite your complexity, but because of it, for it, with it. You understand now that what you called protection was actually prevention. You were preventing hurt, yes, but you were also preventing depth. Preventing conflict, yes, but also preventing resolution. Preventing rejection, yes, but also preventing real acceptance. The silence that kept everything safe also kept everything surface level. And you didn't fall in love to live on surfaces. You fell in love to explore depths. So you dive, you take the risk, you speak the truth that's been building in your chest for months, maybe years. And one of two things happens. Either he meets you there, rising to the occasion, grateful for your honesty, ready to build something real together, or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, if your truth is too much for him to hold, then you learn something equally valuable. That this relationship wasn't built to contain the real you. That you need to find or create space where your full self is welcomed, not just tolerated. Here's what I believe about love after years of thinking about how humans connect, how systems integrate, how futures are built. Love is not a static state to be preserved. It's a dynamic process to be engaged. It's not a finished product to be protected. It's an ongoing creation requiring constant input, adjustment, and honest communication. The women who think silence protects love are operating from a scarcity mindset. They believe love is fragile, finite, easily lost. So they handle it with excessive caution, never testing its strength, never allowing it to be challenged or stretched or deepened. But real love isn't fragile. Real love is resilient. It doesn't shatter under the weight of truth. It's strengthened by it. Think about the strongest materials we use in rocket construction. They're not the ones we protect from stress. They're the ones we subject to enormous pressure, extreme temperatures, intense testing. Through that process, we discover their true capacity. We learn what they can handle. We understand their limits and their strengths. Your love deserves the same respect. Test it with truth. Challenge it with honesty. Strengthen it through the very conversations you've been avoiding. You wanted to protect love by making it easy. But easy love isn't real love. It's a placeholder, a prototype, a preliminary version waiting to be upgraded into something authentic. Real love is complex, challenging, demanding, and worth every difficult conversation, every vulnerable moment, every honest revelation. I think about the future we're building colonies on Mars, sustainable energy systems, brain-computer interfaces, and I realize that all of it requires one fundamental thing: honest communication between engineers and scientists, between companies and customers, between humans and machines, between present reality and future vision. Without honest communication, none of it works. Without truth-telling, none of it happens. Your relationship is building a future too. Maybe not a colony on Mars, but something equally important: a life together, a shared reality, a mutual understanding. And that future cannot be built on silence any more than a spacecraft can be built on assumptions. It requires clear, constant, honest communication about what's working, what isn't, what you need, what you fear, what you dream. The woman you are now, sitting with this message, understanding this truth, she's different from the woman who started reading. Something has shifted. Some permission has been granted. Maybe it's permission to need things. Maybe it's permission to speak up. Maybe it's permission to be complicated, multifaceted, human. Whatever it is, don't let it fade. Don't let the old programming reinstall itself. Don't return to silence just because it feels familiar. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. Your needs matter. Not in some abstract, motivational poster way, but in the concrete reality of your relationship, your daily life, your actual experience. When you silence yourself, you're not just hiding your feelings. You're depriving your partner of the opportunity to truly know you, to truly love you, to truly choose you, based on who you actually are. And if that feels risky, good. It should. Growth is risky. Love is risky. Being alive is risky. The question isn't whether to take risks. The question is, which risks are worth taking? And I'm telling you, the risk of being fully known is worth taking. The risk of expressing your truth is worth taking. The risk of asking for what you need is worth taking. Because the alternative, spending your life behind walls of silence, unknown and unseen even by the person sleeping beside you, that's not safety. That's tragedy. That's not protection. That's imprisonment. That's not love. That's loneliness in company, isolation with a partner, separation under the same roof. You deserve better. He deserves better. Love deserves better. So here's my vision for you. I see you 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. I see you speaking your truth with increasing ease. I see you asking for what you need without apology. I see you bringing your full self to your relationship, the complicated, contradictory, magnificent full self, and watching it transform into something neither of you could have built alone. I see you having hard conversations and surviving them, having conflicts and resolving them, having needs and expressing them, having fears and naming them, and through all of it, growing closer instead of further apart, building intimacy instead of distance, creating connection instead of separation. I see a relationship that's messy and real instead of neat and false. A partnership built on honesty instead of performance. A love that's tested and proven instead of protected and fragile. And I see you, finally, fully seen, finally truly known, finally authentically loved for exactly who you are, not who you pretended to be. This is what's possible when silence ends. This is what's available when truth begins. This is what you've been denying yourself by staying quiet. This is what you can have if you're willing to be brave. The technology I build is about pushing boundaries, about making impossible things possible, about refusing to accept current limitations as permanent constraints. Your relationship can have the same spirit. It can push beyond current limitations. It can make deep connection possible. It can refuse to accept comfortable silence as the permanent state. But it requires your participation. It requires your voice. It requires you to believe that love is strong enough to handle your truth, that connection is possible through honesty, that intimacy requires vulnerability. Love is not a silent thing. It's not meant to be whispered or hidden or protected from itself. Love is meant to be spoken, shared, built, created through the constant exchange between two people who are brave enough to keep revealing themselves to each other, day after day, truth after truth, moment after moment. You have one life, one chance at this specific love, with this specific person, in this specific moment. Don't waste it protecting something that doesn't need protection. Don't spend it hiding something that deserves to be seen. Don't sacrifice it to silence when it's begging to be expressed. Speak, risk, reveal. Trust that love is bigger than your fear, stronger than your shame, more resilient than your worry. Trust that the right person will meet your honesty with their own, your vulnerability with theirs, your truth with acceptance. And if they don't, if your voice is too loud, your needs too demanding, your truth too much, then you haven't lost love. You've discovered incompatibility. You've learned that what you had wasn't strong enough to survive reality. And that's valuable information. That's a gift, even if it hurts, because it frees you to find or create something that can hold all of you. But I believe, and I want you to believe, that most of the time, when you break the silence, when you speak your truth, when you let yourself be fully known, you don't lose love. You find it. The real version. The version that was always there, waiting underneath the performance, beyond the silence, through the fear. That's the love worth having. That's the connection worth building. That's the future worth creating. And it starts with the end of silence. Because silence never protects love, it only delays its true beginning.